Missed the America Assembled event during the New York Tech Week? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Alumni Ventures' own Mike Collins and Ryan Musto are here to break it all down. From the buzz at Lucid's stunning Manhattan studio to the big ideas shaping the future of the American innovation, manufacturing, and robotics space. Let's jump into the recap.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
I'm great. So, big event in New York.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Tell me about it. I heard a ton of people were there, buzzing about it.
Yeah, I mean, an amazing turnout, which we can get into a second. I think maybe to kick things off, we'd love to talk about a couple of the waves that we were trying to ride in setting up this event, because I think it speaks to why there was so much excitement about it. The first, of course, is a macro wave, right? It goes without saying, there's a lot of supply chain disruption and shock nowadays as a result of policy changes, as a result of geopolitical realities. It's my belief, and I think a lot of people's belief, that American startups are best positioned to act, react, problem solve, and ultimately benefit from this disruption. So there are a lot of builders in this space. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to be a part of that. Two, there's a ton of talent. Back in the day, maybe 10 years ago or something, if you were a really talented engineer, you were probably going to go into software. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, for a variety of factors, we are seeing a once in a generation exodus of builders into hard tech, into robotics, into advanced manufacturing. And as an investor, if the smartest folks in the room are building there, that's where we want to be, right? And I think the third reason that this event was really exciting for a lot of us is more of a New York City story. You don't have to go that far back in time for New York to be the single largest manufacturing headquarters of the United States and of the world, right? Back in 1950, there were 1 million plus manufacturers, physical workers working in manufacturing in New York. 1 in 4 workers were doing it. 40,000 plus factories. Obviously, since then, we've lost most of that, but New York is starting to slowly but surely rediscover those roots. We have really wonderful talent here, whether it's Cornell Tech, Columbia, Stevens right across the river, Stevens Institute of Technology, or NJIT. So we were trying to ride all three of these waves here in starting up this event, and it clearly resonated with the community. We had 500 plus RSVPs, which even for Tech Week is pretty exciting. We had obviously a cap on how many people we could accept into the space, which stunk because I would have loved to have all 500 in there. So we had to, we had a line out the door. But on the whole, I think a 10 out of 10 event. And what particularly was exciting for me, I had a chance to chat with a New York Post journalist in the lead up to the event. And he brought to my attention that last year at New York Tech Week, there were literally 0 events about robotics. This year, there were half a dozen plus, which, talk about a really exciting time and place to be in this.
Yeah, it's one of the great hacks of being an investor is go find where young talent is congregating.
Yeah.
And that's where the next unicorns are going to be made, in those kinds of spaces. And I think building stuff is cool again. I think the biggest challenges are combining hardware and software. And I think you really tapped into that. Now, talk to me about the space, the Lucid studio. That sounds amazing. Yeah.
So I think this was kind of one of the crowning jewel elements of what we've put together. We wanted to try to engage some of the big businesses, not just the startups, right, that we do a lot of work with, but the big businesses that are leading the charge in advanced manufacturing, particularly American advanced manufacturing. So we just DMs, we literally cold outreached Lucid Motors, who are one of the premier American EV auto manufacturers. They do, well over the majority of their manufacturing at their facility in Arizona. They are leading the charge in advanced manufacturing. So we hit them up about this event, and there was just this perfect synergy, right? Where they were excited about kind of showcasing the sort of stuff they're doing. Yeah. We're excited about leaning into the earlier stage businesses following that playbook. The space was beautiful. It's in the meatpacking district, which is like a really cool part of Manhattan. Beautiful space. They had a couple cars in there. They had a couple pieces of robotics from within the car kind of showcased around. They had a great bar. They had great, TV screens all over the place showcasing some of the stuff that they're building. So it was, I think, a real perfect matchup, and we're hopefully going to do some more events with them in the future.
No, it's so funny, and I you talk about entrepreneurs and their pitches, and I've been in so many pitches where it's like, okay, it's just kind of ideas and PowerPoints, and when you can actually throw a physical thing on the table, just the energy level always just of the room just totally changes, and they start passing the thing around and asking questions. Humans love three-dimensional stuff, so it sounded like a really fun atmosphere to be in.
Totally.
So we talked. There's a lot of buzz now about kind of supply chain and strategic independence. And, I think all of us believe in trade and comparative advantage, and that we all do better as a world together, working together, doing business together, partnerships together. But there's also this element of being in an independent country and having capabilities to control your own destiny. And I think that's true for every country. So to the extent you can. So talk to me about, your thoughts about that and supply chain.
Yeah. And it goes without saying that this was kind of one of the central conversation points that we both discussed on the panel, but also like the conversation afterwards, between the folks in the audience. And, I think if you pay too much attention to the media, there's this like real debate between the free traders versus the fair traders. But I think in reality, the majority of thoughtful Americans realize that, hey, it's like you say, kind of a mix of both. And there are certainly some sectors and spaces where we ought to be reflective and recognize that, gosh, over the past, 20 to 50 years, we have disadvantaged our ability from a national security perspective to be able to provide for some of these really important goods and services. I think the ones that come to mind for me are probably the ones that come to mind for most folks, and where there is most attention from both a policy perspective as well as like a building perspective. It's semiconductors, it's energy and critical minerals, it's defense and aerospace, and it's biotech and pharmaceuticals. Those are the areas where, through a variety of crises over the past couple of years, whether it be COVID, whether it be some of the geopolitical tension with China over the Strait of Taiwan, things of that sort, we've realized we need to be firming up either friendshoring or onshoring those supply chains, and that's where you see most of the work underway.
There's actually, again, there's always a push in, people wanting to get clicks or notoriety, and try to push people into corners on all these issues, right? And I think most reasonable people say, yes and, right? You don't have to be all of one or all of the other to believe that, there are some areas where, for redundancy, for strategic concerns, we need to build better a lot of stuff. But that doesn't mean, we're going to want to make T-shirts in Chicago. So, talk to me about this promise of automation and robotics and kind of, the workforce dynamics.
Yeah. This was a big question that we asked the panel. And, I think a lot of us are still trying to make up exactly our opinion. It's hard to predict the future, but it's part of our job, right, as investors. I would say a couple things. And this actually, I can't take full credit for this. This is really the panelists' thoughts, but I thought they were instructive. The first thing I'd say is that a lot of the advanced manufacturing that we think is going to happen in the United States over the next, couple of years to the next decade is manufacturing that really has never been here before, right? So semiconductors a great example, right? A lot of that process we want to automate. A lot of that process is currently done in Taiwan and has never really been done here in the United States. So when we think about building robots or other autonomous systems that might be able to do some of this manufacturing, it's not as much replacing current workers as it is adding new capacity. So that's the first point I'd say.
We're kind of leapfrogging ourselves at
exactly
the generation, right?
Exactly, which makes at least me feel a lot better because there are real concerns about the workforce dynamics and the question of like what is the absorption timeline of how quickly and how much of these jobs will be replaced. I would say another thing that was a real point of discussion during the event was the idea that this sort of technology creates new sorts of jobs that like titles that you've never even dreamed of before. Things like maintenance 4.0 specialist. You could have a human robotic interaction designer. There are going to be a slew of new positions and roles that follow this enormous economic shift that are going to provide derivatives of growth for the communities where these factories are positioned, which is why I think it's really important to have like a real, and this is more of a policy and a politician sort of problem than it is an investor politician, but I'll still opine on it. I think it's important to have like a really strong geographic dispersion of where these different factories are located, because rising tides lift all ships.
Yeah. And again, it's the issue of, it's very dangerous to look at these in kind of polar extremes or non-dynamically, that it's somehow like a fixed pie and you're taking a job and there's no new jobs created. And again, I think the idea of kind of dispersion and looking at those things carefully, I think can really mitigate some of that stuff. So, but we're investors and we're looking for opportunities. What are the things that aren't just on the tip of everybody's tongue that you think are maybe, I think real opportunities in Ryan's brain that might not be out there in the public yet?
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. It's really what we're hunting for. And part of the reason we had this event, right? We want to find founders doing these sorts of things. A couple come to mind right off the bat, right? First, mid-tier supplier revitalization. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking about tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. Think of these sorts of suppliers as like the connective tissue between the raw materials and final assembly. In the United States nowadays, most of the tier 1 and tier 3 suppliers are aging, they are undercapitalized, or they are just straight up not here. They're somewhere overseas. So startups that can modernize these layers through automation, ERP overlays, working capital solutions that are tackling this unsexy but vital gap. That's an area that I'm like super focused on. So that's one. Another, I would say, are domestic freight modernization, whether it be rail or trucking or maritime. There is a ton of white space for automation, for electrification, for hybrid freight systems. One of the companies that was there, one of our portfolio companies, Intramotive, is doing exactly this as it relates to rail. So, optimizing point-to-point goods movement without having to rebuild the whole infrastructure is an area that I'm excited about. And I'd say the last area, which actually gets to the prior point that we discussed about like labor, is skilled labor interfaces, right? Baby boomers own most of the businesses that are now in traditional manufacturing, and they do most of the jobs. So there's this enormous unmet gap for intuitive human machine interfaces that lets newer workers come in and operate these systems and make them more efficient, faster, cheaper, etc. Right? So think like AR, VR maintenance, natural language ops for robots, no code machine programs, things of that sort that can ease younger generations of workers getting into this space and having an enormous impact. I think that's a whole bucket of businesses that are going to do super well, just given some of the tailwinds that we've discussed.
So I'm going to make you king for the day. And we have this assignment of just helping the themes behind assembling, building in America.
Yeah.
What one thing would you do?
This is an awesome question. And I can't take full credit for my answer, honestly. I think I would have had another answer perhaps before for the event, but I was catching up with one of our CEOs. His name's Phil, CEO of Duroc. And we were talking about this, and he had a really interesting proposal, which I'm a big fan of, right? So just a little backstory about Duroc, like what it does and perhaps why he thinks this is a good idea. So Duroc transforms tribal manufacturing knowledge into AI for robots. And what I mean by tribal manufacturing knowledge is the idea that like a lot of the people that work, in traditional manufacturing nowadays, they have a series of skill sets that aren't written down anywhere. They're passed down generation by generation, just accrued with 1,000 hours on the job, right? You hear the way that a machine is working and intuitively, okay, this is what's wrong, right? Duroc is trying to translate all of those learnings into actual AI for robots so that we can do these things without the people. And one of the things that he suggested that he thinks that the government should do from a policy perspective is create a bureau that goes out there and actually collects this knowledge en masse, not just in the United States, but around the world. Think about if we had, a series of teams that we sent out to Taiwan, for example, that spent some real time with the aging folks that are working on semiconductors to understand, actually like watch them and understand, take notes. How do they build these darn things? And we're able to translate that back to the United States. I thought that was such an awesome initiative, one that I hadn't heard before. And so if, I'm king for the day, for example, or president for the day or whatever, I think that's something I would take a long, hard look at.
It's funny, Ryan, because I'm in a mill building, and the story of New England textile mills. One of our success stories is we basically went to Great Britain, and it's a little unclear whether bribed or kidnapped or stole dye making technology, which was really an art. And so there was a group of 15 people that came to New England from, I'm in Manchester, New Hampshire, I think, Manchester. And yeah, it was feel, it was touch, it was tribal. And, if we could bring technology and AI and vision and machine learning and all of that,
exactly,
it is a huge unlock to, accelerating building again in America. So
absolutely.
If there was one other thing you wanted to share with the audience on a takeaway, what would it be from the event?
I guess I would say that this is something that is truly nonpartisan. And that was something that excited me a lot, right? Because here you have folks from like all across the wonderful political diversity of our country coming together really on the same page about the idea of making sure that we are more resilient as a nation across a whole host of sectors. And I think this is one element that the event brought to light, is that we had all sorts of conversations with all sorts of different people from a variety of really different backgrounds and political, perspectives, but everybody's on the same page about this. And that excited me a lot. And I think in a period of time where there's obviously a lot of things to disagree on, it's pretty cool that we get to work in a space where there's a lot of people agreeing on something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. It was a fantastic event. Let's do it again next year.
I'm super, super excited for it. More to come.
Thanks.
Thanks.